All right, well, hello, everyone. Welcome to fifth Sunday of Agathos, and happy Memorial Day. So, a few weeks ago, I was asked by Mark and Lois to share my testimony, and I definitely agreed to this time. Last chili cook-off, they asked me with about 10 minutes of preparation, and I said, I can't do that at all. Like, that's too much heaviness all at once to process and then share. But I've been preparing for the past couple of weeks to, deliver it the way I think it's best delivered. So, well, let's get started. So, there's a lot of background that I want to lay out before I talk about. I guess it's more of my story of coming to Jesus, or Jesus coming to me, and so we'll start out with the background. I kind of grew up in a Christian home. It wasn't like a priority for us, but if you were to ask me, I would say, yeah, I was a Christian all the way up until I was about 14 years old. I was baptized around 12. And after my baptism, it just kind of like wasn't a priority for my family anymore. We stopped going to church on Sunday. I didn't have a Christian community. I didn't have Christian friends. It just became an afterthought. So by the time I was 16, 17 years old, it was, my faith was irrelevant to me. It just wasn't a factor of my life. It wasn't it didn't guide me at all. It was not anything I considered, which I don't think is all too unusual for a teenager. But still part of it. So at 17 years old, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. In that process, you go through the enlistment process, and they're going through, if you die, who's going to get your all your stuff, and who's going to get the $400,000. You get $400,000 if you die while you're serving. So not a bad chunk of change, but you're writing all this stuff. You're kind of laying out your will, and one of the things they ask you is about religion. What religion are you? And I had never, no one had talked to me about my faith when I was a 17, 18-year-old kid, so I was unprepared for the question. Sitting down with this guy at the processing station, he said, what religion are you? And I remember kind of thinking my parents would expect me to say I was a Christian, but I didn't really believe that. So I asked him, I said, does it matter? And his response was, I don't know, does it? And I remember thinking in that moment, I was like, no. So when I enlisted, I was enlisted as no preference for religion. So that's kind of where I was at as a 17, 18-year-old kid. And then I went into the military, which is not a culture that I think a lot of Christians would thrive in. It would be a really challenging culture for, at least looking back now, it would have been a really challenging culture to be strong in the faith. And for me, it became even worse. I would say towards 18, 19, 20 years old, I would acknowledge that there may have been a God. I just would admit that, it's not something that's important to me. And then I really started challenging that, and I challenged it from a very worldly perspective. Challenged it in terms of what evidence do I see in life, challenged it in terms of do I feel anything? Do I feel like I belong? Anything like that. And I came to the conclusion, I said, God's not real. Religion is just a way to keep people in some sort of structure, so they all have these values and they all follow these rules that are supposed to just continually advance society. That argument, I'm sure we've all kind of heard and chuckled at, where Actually, maybe I won't say that. I'm going to say something about Santa Claus. Know your audience. But the adults know where I'm going at, you know. So, yeah, there was just a point where I was just like, God's not real. And I became kind of very direct about it. I would challenge other Christians if I found out people were Christians. I would directly kind of attack their faith, attack why they think that way. And I'll tell you what, there's some of us Christians out there who believe, but they weren't necessarily prepared for conversations like that, and weren't necessarily equipped to handle a pretty direct challenger. And I had no problem doing that. So a lot of just like kind of, to me, I thought I was opening people's eyes, you know, break away from your parents' influence or whatever influence you came from when you had a small town. And I had no problem with it. It was actually kind of fun for me. I sometimes enjoy the jest of good argument. So that's just where I was at. I mean, consider myself an atheist. God's not real. You're a fool if you believe in him. And I'll tell you what, that all changed. So during my time in the Marine Corps, I served a combat deployment. I was in California pretty much my whole time, 5 years. So, my family's back here in Ohio, so I was completely separated from family. Saw them, I think once a year, maybe twice a year. Just didn't, 5 years after not really seeing them that much, you kind of like lose a little closeness. And so I went on my combat tour, came back, and just waited my 6 months to get out and move on. So my whole plan was to get out of the Marine Corps, come back to Ohio, go to Ohio State, get my degree, and just keep chugging on in life. So July, or maybe like June 26th was when I got out of the Marine Corps. And it was something I had never prepared for mentally. I realized how naive I was in, I guess, where my identity stood, or what I thought of myself. And the military is weird. You sign your dotted line in the paper at the beginning, and you're in. You sign the dotted line in the paper at the end, and you're out. I mean, it was just like, it was just overnight. I mean, or just like immediately. So I remember signing that paper, and it's like, all right, I'm done. Now what? And right before that, I had gotten into a lot of backpacking, gotten into a lot of camping, gotten into a lot of hiking, did some pretty incredible stuff, climbed some pretty amazing mountains, caught some amazing views. And this was in June. Ohio State wasn't going to start until August, and it's like I got 2 months of absolutely nothing to do. I'm not excited to go see my family, so I'll just delay that and spend 2 months on the road by myself, just traveling the country, living out of my car, living on campsites, living in the backcountry, and that was my plan. So I signed the dotted line, I got out, and I was pumped. I was like, this is going to be so awesome. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, people say they wish they had done. Traveled the country, made it around, saw all these places. And I thought it was just going to be just a great experience, all these places. I was really into the social media aspect of it. I was getting requests for like brand representations, just because I was going to the places that people wanted to see, and people wanted to promote their brand with me. So it was validating, it was fun. So I got out, leaving from California, and embarked on my road trip. That's where it gets kind of heavy for me, so give me some patience if you guys don't mind. It didn't take long. I think it was my first trip was Zion National Park, beautiful park, and it was only 8-hour drive, and it didn't take long for me to start realizing like everything that my whole identity for the past 5 years is gone. My community is gone. I just up and left. The people that I would consider my family, the people I served with on a combat deployment, I would have at the time considered them closer as brothers and sisters than my own. So my family's gone, my community's gone, my home is gone. I'm living in my car, sleeping next to my golf clubs because I had golf clubs and I, had this little spot. My golf clubs were next to me. My whole entire life was packed in my car. And it was like, it just hit me. Like, I'm not a Marine anymore. I signed the line, I'm out. It's not who I am, it's who I was. And it's, affected who I am, but it's no longer my identity. It's no longer a uniform that I wear. And that just hit me. It was profound. I never expected it. And so a lot of sadness. And I guess I had heard that, it's difficult to get out, so it wasn't crazy. So I just, motored on. So got to Zion, still pretty bummed about where I was, but I was like, I just need to get out on the trail. I need to do what I came out here to do, enjoy it, and just looking forward to the 2 months, it'll be a good way to process some stuff. And so I went and I climbed the West Swim Trail. That was my first trailhead that I went on when I was in Zion. So if you've never been to Zion, you start in the canyon and you climb out. And a lot of Zion that we know today was occupied by Mormons in the 19th century, 20th century, and they kind of named a lot of stuff. For instance, Zion. They have rock structures called the Patriarchs, Angel's Landing, the Great White Throne. I mean, pretty amazing structures, but definitely there is just a acknowledgement of God in that valley, and it's cool. So here I am climbing out of the canyon on the West Swim Trail. It's also the same trail that people get to Angel's Landing on, which is like the picturesque spot. It's like the one thing that people go to is like Angel's Landing. You gotta climb it. So everyone's climbing, tennis shoes and shorts. I'm out there, 60 pounds of gear on my back, ready to go out into the trails for a week. Got my life straw and all sorts of stuff. So I'm getting a lot of like attention that I liked. Wow, where are you going? And I said, you guys are gonna go right. We're gonna climb out of this. You're gonna go right to Angel's Landing. I'm gonna go left into the backcountry. So a lot of comments, a lot of people talked. It was cool. It was just another distraction, or I didn't feel lonely. I felt like people were interested in me. So we make it to the top, and everyone's going right, and I go left, and immediately, it's like I walk 20 yards, and now there's no one around, no one anywhere. And it's quiet. I'm alone again. I'm kind of tired. And I'm like, okay, chugging along. And I don't think I made it within a quarter mile, maybe a half mile. And I just stopped. And I couldn't move anymore. I could hardly breathe anymore. there was a rock right next to me, and I sat down, and I trying to assess what happened, like what's going on. I can't move, I can't breathe, almost like in like a shock state. And it was undeniable for me in that moment that the presence of Jesus was there. Like it was, I'm there, I'm sitting, and I'm like, uh-oh to me. I was like, he's real, and he's here right now. And he is just, it was like, in a way, it's like, are you going to acknowledge me now? You're alone, you're vulnerable, you've got nothing. I've essentially stripped you of everything that you ever held on to. All of your accomplishments in the military, those don't mean anything now. So you can't cling on to those. And I just remember thinking, like, what have I done to be so foolish, to mock our God? And it was brutal. I mean, I was trembling. I was in shock. And there was no question. I mean, I was an atheist. And I said, you are real, like this, you are real right here. There is nothing else around here to influence me except for the presence of God. And it was immediately then, I was like, okay, we've got some work to do. And, but man, it was emotional. It was heavy. And, it was just powerful. So, man, he is faithful. It's a strange thought to me that I was just some young jerk, didn't even acknowledge you, and he was just there. And arguably probably my biggest time of need, all alone in the wilderness. I mean, no cell phone service, no one to talk to, kind of probably going through some sort of a crisis that I was ignoring by filling it with activity. And I just needed him more than ever, and I didn't realize it. So he just showed himself and stopped me in my tracks. So the next 2 months was just, I continued on. I immediately wanted to go home. I was like, this is too heavy. This is too much. But I guess I just got to grind through these 2 months and see what happens. And it was, walking through woods and national parks by myself, just talking to God for hours, getting to know him more, confessing the things that I had done, and asking for forgiveness. And man, it was pretty incredible knowing that, I knew enough from my upbringing that he was just all forgiving. And it was incredible to listen to know, there was no, route to back into his favor. It was just I acknowledged him, I was there, I confessed, I asked for forgiveness, and I just knew I had it. I just knew I was back in his kingdom, back in his flock, and I just had immediate assurance of that and confidence in that. So pretty incredible 2 months diving through that, working it out, and then living it. So came home, and the rest is history. Nothing, normal church stuff, missionary trips, running small groups. So I definitely feel like he's used me in a lot of ways. And that was only 4 years ago. So I would still consider myself a fairly young believer. but he just uses us whatever he needs us, and there's been opportunity, and it's been incredible. So I asked Katie to kind of come and land this for me. I'm not the best at landing. I'm good at talking, but I asked her to, so if you don't mind.
Yeah, so what Nick didn't know when he was in the military for 4 years, or once he got out and was in the wilderness, was there was a girl who was single for a lot of college. And that meant, in my upbringing, praying for your husband, praying for his safety, praying, really a lot of protection, and that he was pursuing the Lord, and that the Lord was pursuing him if he didn't know the Lord. And so I don't know how many times I said that prayer. I don't know when I said that prayer, but I know I was. So that's just a really cool, I think, testimony for us to be able to share together is you don't have to know necessarily even who you're praying for. If there's somebody who's in your life who you feel like is too far gone, or eloquent words just don't work with them, they're not going to be convinced. Nick didn't need somebody to convince him of anything. There was not a person who came into Nick's life who said, Jesus is the way. Jesus found him where he was at. I mean, we read these stories in the Bible, but this is just another testament, real life standing in front of you, of an encounter with the Lord saving someone. I was praying and those prayers were powerful. I didn't know that. Nick didn't know that. Sometimes that's all it takes. The Lord, the Bible tells us that a good shepherd leaves the 99 to find the one. And it's just a story of that. And so I think, Nick's testimony is just extremely powerful, and it just gives us hope. Just gives us so much hope. One, in the power of prayer. Two, in the power of an encounter with the Lord. How that can really just be more convincing than anything that we can do. And I think that just gives us hope. So that's, what I wanted to share.